This week, the Surgeon General says social media sites need warning labels for kids. Proclaiming your faith, how athletes are paving the way to speak out for their personal beliefs. And is children's TV making a return to wholesome family values? One celebrity is betting on it. These stories and much more coming up this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stegall. Now, let's meet the panel. Some of the men and women behind the stories at ReadLion.com. Josh Mann is our managing editor, Michael Ryan, our executive editor, and Faith Perkins, staff writer at The Lion. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Jumping into this week with teachers who are now deciding to make the leap. They're getting out of public education, Michael, and it's not just because of the pay.
No, it's because of frustration with differing goals that teachers and administrators increasingly have. And it's a warning from this one former Georgia teacher, Jeremy Noonan, who basically had to decide whether to teach or to worry about graduation rates. And increasingly, those are not the same things. He was actually asked at one point when he expressed his frustration, is it your job to teach chemistry or to teach responsibility? Well, my answer, and I hope his is, yes, to both of them. There were three practices in particular that vexed him. One was makeup work, which is basically turning in any time between now and the end of the semester. The curving test scores, turning a 49 into a 70 from an F to a C minus. And then credit recovery courses, which basically offer open internet tests, which, what could go wrong there? Except in Congress, that's not how the real world works.
Josh, the other thing that I hear a lot from public school teachers is an increased encroachment on what they believe in their private life. While they're not there to evangelize, if their Christian faith comes up, for instance, people feel like they can't speak up.
Yeah, teachers have, I think teachers feel like they're losing the ability to kind of run their own classroom and to be themselves. And we're seeing schools, it's not just K-12, it's also higher education. They're becoming very top-heavy, a lot of spending on administrative staff. The bloat of administration has far surpassed the increase in staff in the classroom, and it's creating conflict for these teachers.
Here's another story, and it's a big one. It's an important one about kids and social media. Josh Mann, I have kids in school who got on phones probably too early, if I'm going to be honest about it as a parent. If I had it to do all over again, I would have waited. In fact, my kids tell me they would have preferred I wait. Now, not at the time when they were young, but the importance of waiting on social media for kids.
Well, let me ask you, at what age did you give them their first pack of cigarettes?
Great question.
Because, if you've ever looked at a package of cigarettes, and I left mine at home, there's a Surgeon General's warning, and it says something like smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the U.S. Surgeon General today, Vivek Murthy, has just written a New York Times op-ed suggesting we need a similar label affixed to social media platforms because, and this is absolutely true, all the data suggests social media is having a harmful effect on kids' mental health, kids and teens alike, and it's a real problem. Now, whatever you think about the label, I believe it is a wake-up call for parents to get involved, to at least think about how can I help my child responsibly use social media, if at all, and at what point? And parents need to get involved with that because it is causing problems for kids.
I'll confess, I caved to pressure, and we did, I think, 12 years old, 13 years old, 6th, 7th grade. It was too early, Faith, and I wonder when is the appropriate time, or is that a parent's call?
Yeah, I think it goes to every parent. My parents waited till I could drive, and they gave me one in case of emergencies. But if you look at the PragerU Detrans documentary, a lot of those minors attribute to social media as a reason why they transitioned. So I think you have to take that into effect before you give kids any sort of phone or social media.
The upside of it is I think kids, at least of my kids' generation, seem to be aware of it, Michael. Like there's an awareness that it did something. And I hear my kids now say, I'm seeing kindergartners on phones and they don't like it because my son noted a kindergarten class that he was volunteering in. He said these kids had nicer phones than I, and he said I felt sad because none of them were talking to each other. So my 18-year-old recognizes that in kindergartners, so maybe there's hope.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's a movement toward phones later on, social media accounts later on. I think people are starting to understand the dangers. The idea of warning labels is maybe a nice one. The warning labels really kind of protected the tobacco companies, really, on packs of cigarettes. But a lot of people are saying ban social media accounts for minors. One thing the Surgeon General said I thought was really rich. He said the moral test of any society is how well it protects its children. Really? You really want to go there? Because have you seen the books they've been giving to kids lately?
Yeah.
How about some warning labels on those?
Faith, you have been writing a lot about Title IX. This is a subject, if you are familiar with the Herzog Foundation, Riley Gaines is going to be a guest at the foundation soon to talk about this very thing. She's become sort of a national spokesperson on the issue. You're starting to see individual districts and states assert themselves, and that's coming to a loggerheads with the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. So the California Cinco Valley Unified School District just voted to pass a resolution, ultimately not agreeing with Biden's new, what is that word?
The Title IX.
Yeah, the new Title IX rule.
Yeah,
Should we
the
start
executive
that?
action, which has, I think, thrown a lot of school districts, schools, competitive sports for a loop. They don't know how to deal with it, Josh. And some of them are just saying we're not going to.
Yeah, and the Biden administration has been losing in court on this issue. There was just an appeals decision that upheld a federal judge's block of the Department of Education guidance. Now, that's different than the latest so-called final rule from the Department of Education, but they're basically telling schools in this final rule, August 1st, you have to start complying and basically acknowledging anybody's gender identity. So they're redefining biological sex as gender identity in Title IX. Well, 2 injunctions were just issued by in different courts based on these lawsuits from AGs against the Biden administration. The short of it is in 10 states now there are temporary injunctions blocking Title IX, this new rule, from taking effect. So at least in 10 states, school districts might have a little bit longer, but this is being litigated, and it's an important issue and something to keep our eye on.
This is where homeschoolers are smart. Homeschoolers have always understood that if you cannot extract the federal government from the funds you take in an organization, the federal government tries to implement their rules and their standards on you. And I think that's always what's made the homeschool community, Michael, very, very suspicious of, for instance, things like universal school choice, which I appreciate. I mean, I understand their point of view there.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are suspicious of the government anymore.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's that Title IX rule is blocked in 10 states, and it's going to grow. Here's the crux of the problem, inadvertently highlighted by the New York Times, which wrote, Republicans and conservative groups try to overturn a policy that expanded protections for LGBTQ students. That statement by the New York Times is made without any regard for what that policy does to girls or whether it's even legally enacted. And also from the New York Times, the new regulations broadened the scope of the law. Well, unless you want a dictator, that's not the job of a president. That's the job of the legislature.
We have consistently been seeing stories, positive stories, about how athletes are invoking their faith. Coaches. This trend continues. We talked about it in the last episode about the Oklahoma ladies softball team, I believe. Now we head to Kentucky, and this also happened with the championship Boston Celtics, Josh.
Yeah, so Nick Mingione, the Kentucky Wildcats head baseball coach, he was in a presser just after they made it to the College World Series. So Omaha, Nebraska, it's college baseball's biggest stage. There's kind of a final tournament. Well, Kentucky made it, and this coach, the road to get there was long, and he was asked about it. And he basically just said, you know what I had to learn? I had to learn to surrender to God. I was trying to do it on my own. So this guy just sits there during the press conference and gives a Christian testimony.
Wow.
He's got his wife and son by his side. Then he looks over at his son and he says, now, my son's memorized a Bible verse for every letter of the alphabet. Tell him what your J is. And so the son recites a Bible verse saying that basically with God all things are possible. And so this guy's just laying out his Christian testimony in front of his family and all the world. And it's great to see prominent Christian athletes, coaches, even celebrities at times, who are just vocal about their faith, exercising their free speech rights, but also giving a great testimony.
Faith, is it in competitive sports, are people feeling more inclined to share their faith because so often an individual standout or coach has that autonomy to say, this is what makes me good at what I do, and they know they're less vulnerable? It's not like speaking out at your job. Is that the difference?
Yeah, I think so. It's like attributing and showing everyone why you're doing what you're doing and why you think that you're doing so well at it.
Yeah, I love the individualism of it, Michael. Is that the point? You know, you don't feel the pressure, the professional pressure to maybe not speak out. I think athletes and coaches seem like, Harrison Butker, the most classic example lately.
Yeah, and they're free. I mean, the championship athletes, people who don't have to worry about being canceled, they're free to express their faith. But I think it's also an indication of the humility that your faith brings. And humility is something that can vaccinate you against societal narcissism, which we see running rampant. I mean, the studies are showing that narcissism is going through the roof. Self-esteem is one thing, and that's a good thing, but vanity is another. Ultimately, we really do have to worry about the kind of world that we're going to leave to Keith Richards.
And the Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark business has been sort of interesting too, because you see the egos that are getting bruised in the WNBA, and so often they talk about me, and I, and they're angry that Caitlin is stealing the spotlight from them. And it's striking to hear the kind of that kind of I made it, I'm here, I'm important, it's all me. That's one of the rare spots in sports right now, Josh, where I feel like it's turning inward and kind of cannibalizing itself.
Yeah, and I really hope for the WNBA that they can kind of figure out how to be competitive and create these kind of, you want rivalry.
Sure.
But just by way of contrast, you hear some of the guys in Michael Jordan's era who kind of seemed to hate him on the court, who nevertheless acknowledged the way that he paved for them, for commercials, for big shoe deals, and just growing the game in such a way that they all benefited. And I think potentially Reese and Clark could do the same, battle it out on the court, but realize, just like fighters do, sometimes you'll have MMA fighters who respect each other, but they seem like they hate each other's guts. And it's all to build up the fight and to, raise the profile of the fight. I think something similar could happen.
Yeah, and bringing it back to the perspective that faith gives you, the Boston Celtics coach, they just won the NBA championship, but somebody during the process asked him what he's been doing to take his mind off the pressure of the finals and everything. Did you see what he answered? He said he spent some time with 3 girls under the age of 21 who were battling terminal cancer. He said it's real easy to say all glory to God when you're hoisting a trophy. Try that in their position.
Final story is one that I think is just kind of a lot of fun, and I personally happen to do a little investigative reporting on this one myself. Kirk Cameron has a brand new children's television show that he's producing, a la Mr. Rogers. Is there a marketplace for that, Faith?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that in this day and age, we need more age-appropriate and kid-friendly shows with educational meaning behind it.
Yeah, Josh, I'm intrigued by it. Brave Books is the outfit that's kind of backing the project, not just children's television, but children's books. Is that on the rise? Yeah,
and it was something he told you, Chris, that stuck out to me. He said, we have one shot at raising our children. And I think, he feels this burden to produce wholesome content, pro-family, pro-faith. And the irony, he notes, is that now this is criticized. Wholesome content is actually criticized, where it used to be celebrated. But I think people will like this and enjoy it, and I think it's important that we continue to produce wholesome, quality, pro-family content.
I will say what's so impressive about him too, Michael, is he's of an age, his children are mostly grown or close to grown. He could just pack it up and go do something else, but he feels really personally invested in the future of the country and America's youth, which I thought was admirable. He certainly doesn't have to.
Oh, and I think it's brilliant for him to be reviving the spirit of Fred Rogers.
Yes.
I'm old enough to remember him as a youth and a parent, and what a great man that was. Recognizing greatness right in front of you, real time, is a real art that I haven't mastered yet. Every year I watch the NFL Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, and I think, I had no idea how great that guy was, right? I have the same feeling with Fred Rogers. I had no idea how great this person was until that documentary about him, Won't You Be My Neighbor? You really got to see that thing to understand it. Kirk Cameron seems uniquely qualified to take up that baton and run with it, especially today. The issues facing kids today are much thornier and much more sinister than they were during Fred Rogers' time.
These old clips on social media that are surfacing of Fred Rogers, to your point now, of him singing, you're born a girl, you're always a girl, girls are the mommies. I mean, it's stuff now that would be considered just outrageous, but it's also funny that used to be something he would sing about and teach little kids. You're born a boy, and only boys can be daddies. Like, that's revolutionary stuff. Anyway, before we wrap up, we go down the line and ask the panel their favorite stories of the week. Faith, what would you have people read to the Lion this week?
So this one's Jillian's story. It's about the Catholic college president who condemns the cancel culture after Harrison Butker's speech.
Michael?
Yeah, I think it's the Kirk Cameron, Fred Rogers story, because I think Fred Rogers exuded Christ's love, and Fred Rogers' specialty was showing kids that they're loved, and that's in short supply today.
Also a minister, by the way, which I didn't know until that documentary. And Josh?
Yeah, we've got an article coming out on the Boston Celtics and their recent NBA championship, and just the number of their coach and also some players expressing their faith, and so you can look forward to that.
And that will do it for us this week. Be sure to keep up to date on all the latest news stories every day at readlion.com. For all of us at The Lion, thanks for downloading the show, and we'll see you next time.